The blockade is live. As of 10 a.m. Eastern Time yesterday, the United States Navy is positioned outside the Strait of Hormuz, stopping every ship that tries to enter or leave Iranian ports. J.D. Vance spent 21 hours on Pakistani soil and left without a deal. Iran's foreign minister says they came inches from signing something. Washington says Iran was living in a fantasy about its own strength. And then, this morning, President Trump told reporters outside the Oval Office that people from Iran had been in touch with Washington. They want to work a deal. So let's be clear about where we are tonight. The blockade is real. Oil is at $99 a barrel. The ceasefire expires in 8 days, that is April 22nd. Iran's Revolutionary Guard is on maximum combat alert. Britain and France have just announced they will not join the US blockade. They are instead organizing a rival multinational mission to reopen the strait. This is not a pause in the crisis. This is the crisis at its most complex. I am Zunaira Azhar and you're watching Decode, where we define and analyze the stories shaping our world. Tonight, we do not just report what happened in Islamabad. We decode what the world looks like with the blockade, no deal at the moment, and the Europe not responding to Trump's call to join the blockade. 3 scenarios, 3 sets of questions. Let's begin. J.D. Vance, Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner. That was America's team. Iran sent its foreign minister Abbas Araghchi. They sat in the same building, the Serena Hotel in Islamabad, for the first direct face-to-face US-Iran engagement in more than a decade. Pakistan facilitated and the world watched. Vance was on the ground for 21 hours. That is how long this negotiation lasted before it didn't get anywhere. Here is what we know about the breakdown. America's demands were sweeping: complete halt to uranium enrichment, dismantling of all enrichment facilities, transfer of highly enriched uranium out of the country, and an end to Iran's funding of armed proxies across the region. Full, permanent, verifiable, nothing halfway. Iran's position. It retains control of the Strait of Hormuz as sovereign territory. America lifts all sanctions. America pays war reparations. Iran keeps a civilian nuclear program, and Iran demanded a regional ceasefire, including in Lebanon, where Israel has continued striking independently of anything negotiated between Washington and Tehran. Iran's foreign minister said they came inches from an Islamabad MOU. He said they negotiated in good faith. They encountered his framing: maximalism, shifting goalposts, and a blockade. His words on record: 0 lessons earned. Pakistan was shocked. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif's government had invested enormous diplomatic credibility in this process. They expected more days of talk. What they got was Vance back on a plane. And then, while the Serena Hotel was still processing what had happened, Trump went to Truth Social. Effective immediately, he wrote, "The United States Navy will begin the process of blockading any and all ships." The blockade went live the next morning at 10 a.m. Eastern. Every war ends at a table. But tables only work when both sides share the same will for peace. America's viewpoint is that Iran is broken. 40-plus days of strikes, economy destroyed, military degraded, proxies weakened. The US official who briefed reporters after Islamabad said Iran misread its own position. Translation: you think you have leverage? You do not. Iran's answer: we still control the most important sea lane on the planet. 230 oil tankers are sitting trapped inside the Gulf right now, according to Abu Dhabi's national oil company. Shipping through the strait has been reduced to over 90%. Oil hit $119 at its peak. The longer this continues, the higher gas prices climb in America, and that is politically toxic for Trump going into midterms. We hold the cards. These are 2 sides, 2 completely different maps of the same war. When both sides declare victory and make that a vantage point of discussion, you cannot agree on what a compromise might look like. Why? Because compromise always requires one side to accept less than it thinks it deserves, at least in the closed rooms. And no one accepts less than they deserve when they believe that they are about to win. That is not a failure of diplomacy. That is a failure of shared reality. And it is the story nobody is telling clearly. Before we build scenarios, I want to start with the question nobody is asking cleanly. Not who is right, but why do both sides believe so completely that they are? Because until we understand that, we cannot understand what breaks the deadlock. Let's turn this into a debate and welcome our first guest. Tonight, we are joined by Ambassador Ali Imran, a seasoned diplomat, and let's see what's his take on all these scenarios. Thank you so much, Ambassador Imran, for joining us. Iran's foreign minister says they came inches from an Islamabad MOU. America says Iran was living in its own fantasy about its own bargaining position. So both sides basically left the same room with opposite readings. Are we looking at a coercive diplomacy when two parties have fundamentally different assessments of who holds the leverage?
No, I think it was a timing problem. What happened was that till the last hour and a half, they seemed to be coalescing towards a joint communique or something of that sort in a very good atmosphere. But then some people say a call came. I don't know about that, but then suddenly the US assumed a maximalist position as far as nuclear enrichment was concerned, and it said nothing less than zero enrichment and zero capacity to enrich, despite Iran being a member of the NPT. And so suddenly Iran was caught unawares. And there are various theories that Kushner called Netanyahu or somebody and changed his stance. That I don't know. But the US assumed a maximalist position, and it wanted guarantees that Iran would never, ever in its lifetime become nuclear. By nuclear, I mean would enrich uranium, no enriched uranium. This was a departure from the 3% or so they had almost agreed in Oman. So that became one of the reasons for the breakup of this round.
Right. If you compare the two negotiations, the one with Oman previously and the one that we are calling Islamabad talks, the Omani foreign minister clearly said about those that we were inches away from a clear mandate and we were agreeing on a lot, and Iran was ready to give up on the enriched uranium clause. Despite that, it didn't succeed and we witnessed a war. Same has happened this time. Do you think this is something that has something to do with Washington changing goalposts time and again due to Netanyahu or Israeli lobby?
No, in Muscat, when they were in Oman, it was a clear case of deception. They were preparing for an air attack, gathering intelligence. Netanyahu had been to Washington, sometimes publicly, sometimes secretly. So that was just plain deception, which is the reason for Oman's ire. And their foreign minister, a thorough gentleman who I know personally, was so offended that he wrote in the Economist, and he was actually in Washington or was about to leave when the war started.
Yeah.
So that was deception. This time, I think they were near an agreement, and suddenly maybe there are various plausible, implausible theories. Some people say J.D. Vance should not have been. I mean, Trump did not want him to get the limelight, and some people say that Netanyahu intervened. Other people say that they wanted total capitulation of Iran, which should be seen also.
Yeah.
So this time it's different. This time the talks were taking place in the middle of a war, in the middle of a decapacitating economy of the world, oil shortages, gas shortages, mineral shortages, fertilizer shortages. So this was different. That was prior to a war. That was to avert a war. This was to stop a war.
Right. We were talking that both sides were so convinced that they hold the cards of victory. So what historically forces one of them to update that belief? Does it always require a military event, or can this economic pressure alone can shift the map of reality for both?
I think Iran was okay with what was happening till, as the foreign minister says, till the end came, and suddenly they saw the goalpost being shifted. The US was also okay till I think instructions came from Washington due to whatever reasons that they should further make their own stance maximalist. So something happened.
Which we were no, I think, I believe. Trump.
I think even most Americans that I know, they seem to believe that Israel intervened.
Yeah, everybody
But
believes that.
they're,
Yeah.
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 So maybe they're right. Maybe Trump wanted the final glory to be his, and maybe he wanted better terms, and he had the Hormuz blockade in his mind. So, uh, so it can be any of these things.
Ambassador, could it all be a theatrical kind of a display of that, yes, we want to stop it, but look, Iran is not agreeing to it, that kind of display for the domestic audience? Could it be that?
Yes, it could very well be that, but then I would have thought that it would be followed by increased horrific attacks,
Yeah.
air attacks on Iran. Those they haven't happened till now, but we still have a few days to go before the ceasefire ends. But in the meanwhile, I think Trump has been fed by somebody that you don't even need to do anything. You just stop Iran's ships from getting out for exports. And it will kill two birds with one stone. China won't get its oil, and Iran won't be able to export. And the bill runs into $180 million a day. But again, I think he has miscalculated. I think again this is more theatrics. This is not a serious statesman who wants to resolve the issue. He wants Iran to come begging for relief because he feels that he will economically strangulate Iran. He doesn't realize that they already have, as we say in Urdu, a coffin on their heads. Look at their faces. Their faces were very serious, and the airline pictures of the little children who embrace Shahadat. So there the mindset won't be swayed by a few $1 million.
Right.
They will find ways to send oil through a land route, maybe even through Pakistan. And they would feel that China would now jump into the fray. The Americans think that China would force Iran to accept zero ability for nuclear enrichment.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So continuing on what we were already talking, that Trump announced the blockade within a day of Islamabad talks. Was Pakistan blindsided? And Iran called it moving the goalpost. We also said the same, that they have been doing it. Is that a tactic that has ever worked in the history of a coercive diplomacy? Or does publicly escalating during an active negotiation almost always kill the negotiation again and again would work?
Actually, this moving the goalpost, a commonly accepted goalpost, is always bad for peace. So I don't think what the plan is. Maybe tomorrow on Truth Social, he'll say that we have won. I've decided. I'm talking to very good Iranians. They want a peace deal. I've decided that I'm going to have a peace deal. I'm going to go to Geneva and meet them. And there in Geneva, I will conclude the US victory and a band like that. I don't think he wants confrontation with China. And I think China, what will China do? I think Iran would give the uranium it has enriched, but it would never give up its right to enrichment. That is a no-no for Iran.
Right. The sticking points, one of the sticking points, I would say. On the surface, the ones that seemed like very clear that were enrichment facilities, as you are saying, the straight reparations, but the Iranian foreign minister specifically said that they were inches away from a deal. And coming from Iranians, this is a big deal because they are very tough negotiators. So which was, in your opinion, the final line that neither side would cross? Was it the nuclear question? Was it the reparations? Was it Lebanon? The one dimension neither side could control because Israel is not bound. It says it is not bound by any ceasefire America and Iran are negotiating.
That's true. There are many people who believe it was Lebanon. There are others who believe that the pace agreed of returning Iranian money and confiscated Iranian money was very slow. It was to be phased out, and Iran wanted an immediate payment to see the sincerity of the American side, who they don't trust. So it could be that, but the proclaimed the proclaimed sticking point was the nuclear sticking point. I think the Iranian foreign minister is trying to hint that they were inches close to a deal, and then something happened.
Yeah.
And the whole world, American journalists, you would know many who are in Islamabad still thinking that maybe a new round could take place here. Uh, all of them, those I've seen or met, they have a consensus that it was Israel and it was Kushner, and they
Witkoff.
don't say much about Witkoff, but both Kushner and Witkoff have pages to Netanyahu. So they feel that Israel scuttled the deal because Israel wanted to talk with Lebanon from a position of strength, and but those talks are sort of meaningless. What talks can take place if only the two ambassadors are talking? I
And
mean, ambassadors in Washington D.C. My God, those are no talks at all.
the very fact that J.D. Vance became the face of the Islamabad talks was one point that people were very optimistic that something good, at least something good, let it be even 5% or 2%, is going to come out of it. Yet, it seems as if Steve Witkoff and Kushner prevailed. Is this a right reading?
Yes, it's the right reading. Problem with J.D. Vance is that he is anti-war, he is not a Zionist, but he can't seem to be seen too much on the other side. Therefore, he refused to put his foot down and take a stance, because then he would have been labeled too much pro-Iran, too much pro-peace, too much anti-war.
Or got
He
a
wanted
bad
to,
deal for America?
yes, yes.
Do you see another round of talks in sight?
Yes, I do. I do. I think they're also talking as we speak, at a junior level, and in the shadows. I think maybe even the leadership is talking. I think they haven't stopped talking, but I don't know whether formal round would be held and where would it be held. But I'm pretty sure that something is going to happen. Diplomacy is going to get another chance.
Ambassador Ali Imran, thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure
Thanks for
having you.
having me.
So, a collapse that almost was not, a blockade that is now live, and a phone call that may or may not mean something. The next question is, what are the actual pathways forward? Not the best case, not the nightmare, the real scenarios with real probabilities. That is what we decode next after a short break. The blockade went live at 10 a.m. Eastern yesterday. Within hours, oil jumped above $103. By evening, as word spread that Iran may have made contact with Washington, oil pulled back to around $99. The S&P 500 actually closed in the green, the market moving on hope of a deal more than on fear of the blockade. Trump said this morning that people from Iran contacted the US and want to work a deal. Dollar and oil both moved on that statement. Bloomberg is reporting that the two sides are in discussions to hold more negotiations before the ceasefire expires on April 22nd. Britain has refused to join the blockade. France has refused. They are organizing a rival multinational conference to restore Hormuz navigation, separate from both the US and Iran. The IEA, World Bank, and IMF issued a joint warning today. Even if the strait reopens, fuel and fertilizer prices may remain elevated for a prolonged period. The IRGC's spokesperson warned Iran could unveil new forms of warfare if the conflict continues. Iran's parliament speaker told American consumers to enjoy the gas at $4 to $5 because after the blockade, they will miss it. Trump's statement was vague. He did not say who called, what was discussed, or what Iran offered. It may be genuine back-channel contact. It may be Trump managing the domestic political pressure of $4.12 gas prices. Let's look at scenario one. Let's assume it. Iran returns to the table. Scenario one could be that the blockade squeezes Iran's already fragile economy. Iran cannot offload its oil. Analysts estimate the blockade costs Iran approximately $435 million per day in combined economic damage, with oil wells facing permanent damage if shut down for extended periods. The regime decides the cost of holding out exceeds the cost of a deal. Pakistan's Islamabad Accord resumes shuttle diplomacy. A second round of talks produces an agreement. Iran surrenders enriched materials, retains a small supervised civilian program. Sanctions partially lifted, Strait reopens fully. Let's look at scenario two. An accident starts a bigger war. This may look like what we already previewed. Last Saturday, the USS Michael Murphy and USS Frank Patterson transited the strait with their AIS transponders switched on, a deliberate signal. The IRGC challenged them on radio and reportedly launched a drone in their direction. A civilian vessel recorded an IRGC voice saying, "This is the last warning." That exchange happened while peace talks were still ongoing in Islamabad. Now, multiply that moment across days and weeks of active blockade enforcement. US warships are physically maintaining a perimeter around Iran's ports. The IRGC is on maximum combat alert. Iran has laid mines. The US is conducting mine cleaning operations. In a 34-kilometer waterway, one misread signal, one drone from a mid-level commander, one warning shot interpreted as an attack, and the ceasefire ends without any leader in Washington or Tehran deciding it should. That's really scary. And the scenario three, which could be a really long, painful stalemate. What this look like may be that no one fires, no deal is signed, the ceasefire technically holds, but the strait remains contested and partially functional for months. Oil stays around $95 to $100. The IEA, World Bank, and IMF warned today, even after the strait opens. Fuel and fertilizer prices may remain elevated for a prolonged period due to infrastructure damage. The global economy absorbs a slow, grinding tax on every consumer. The new wild card in this scenario, France and Britain have announced they will not join the US blockade. They are rather organizing a rival conference, a peaceful multinational mission to restore Hormuz navigation, separate from both US and Iran. This transatlantic divide, Washington blockading, London and Paris building on an alternative, is new. It changes the geometry of the stalemate. It gives Iran an opportunity other than total capitulation. The signal to watch here would be to watch China. If Beijing delivers advanced air defense systems to Iran, the stalemate calcifies into something structural. Watch the transatlantic divide. If the France-UK conference produces a formal mandate and Iran signals openness to it, a European off-ramp becomes viable. So three scenarios, revised probabilities, and signals that have already started to move. Let's bring in our guest to stress test these scenarios. We are joined by Dr. Kamran Bukhari, who is a senior resident fellow, Middle East Policy Council. Thank you so much, Dr. Kamran, for joining us. First, what is your initial take on the Islamabad talks?
I would say so far so good. I mean, we weren't expecting any miracles. Nobody expected that, within 20 hours or so, we would have a deal. But the fact that we've come this far, as is evident from the interview that the vice president gave to Fox News last night, I mean, I think we're on track in terms of the progress. The White House has acknowledged as much, and the behavior of the Iranians is also suggesting that this is the case. Now, where do we go from here is the big question.
Yeah. What are the chances of a second or more rounds of talks? Or if we just randomly build three scenarios, what's more probable in your opinion? Iran returning to the table, an accidental war because something happens in the Strait of Hormuz because they are eye to eye, or a stalemate?
First of all, I don't think we should equate, the Iranian capabilities with the U.S. capabilities. I think that's a very popular misnomer around the world. The Iranians know this as much. They are absolutely engaged in information operations because that's what you do when you know you need to compromise. So I think that the issue here is best case scenario is we have some sort of an understanding when we don't know. I hesitate to call it an agreement. I would say it's more of an understanding because the divide is so wide that getting to an agreement per se that will last is going to take time. Remember that the Obama administration, even with its watered down, JCPOA, did not reach the final stages until 2 years later. So I think we need to bear that in mind. But for now, I think there's an understanding that can be expected. That's the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is, of course, there's a miscalculation, and that leads to further conflict. The Iranians have been miscalculating since, as was evident in the June 2025 war, and of course the collapse of the three meetings between Witkoff and Mr. Abbas Araghchi in Muscat and in Geneva. This is right before the war began, the current war on February 28th. So I think that, we just have to wait and see. There are too many moving parts right now for us to sort of say, hey, this is where things are likely headed. But the imperatives of Iran and the imperatives of the United States are as such that we will likely reach some form of an understanding.
Right. President Trump says Iran called this morning, and Bloomberg reports that new talks are being discussed before April 22nd. Does this claim, combined with the blockade's economic pressure, genuinely change the probability of a deal, or is this Trump managing the political optics of $4.12 gas prices ahead of midterms?
Of course, the president has to manage, public expectations because the price of gas has indeed gone up. There are serious political and economic limitations, that the president is challenged by. There's no, denying that. But I think that there's a bigger thing here, which is that the issue for the American side is one of political and economic repercussions. The issue for the Iranian regime is more existential. This much has been acknowledged by regime officials. And for them, the goal is, look, we need regime preservation. And regime preservation can only come in two ways, and both are necessary. You can't just have one. First is a permanent end to hostilities. What the Iranians don't want is to go back to last June and then, have the fear that this war can erupt at any point in time. They've been hit hard. Their internal political economic situation is very fragile. They can't have open-ended conflict. So what they don't want is for the United States to say, okay, since there's no deal, we'll continue with some military operations and unilaterally withdraw. They don't want that. So they need a permanent end to hostilities. Number two is it's not just a permanent end to hostilities, and the only way you can get to a permanent end to hostilities is through a compromise on the issues that everyone knows about, enrichment, ballistic missile capability, proxies, and then, of course, the Strait of Hormuz. So I think that because of that, because of what the Iranians must have, I think we are looking at, these talks moving forward, another round, perhaps two, we don't know, because we don't have the details on that. But the fact that the Iranians came to Islamabad to begin with, after the president threatened strikes on infrastructure, suggests that they know that there's less to gain from in terms of blocking the Strait of Hormuz and far more to lose.
Both sides declare victory, but realistically speaking, or making an analysis, which side is in the more need of an off-ramp?
The Iranians, clearly. I mean, for them, it's existential. That's the point I've been making. I mean, The United States needs an off-ramp, but it's of a different nature. Okay. It's not existential for the United States. So I'll explain in the following way. Let's say there's no deal. The United States has the option to continue with a short period of further airstrikes and then unilaterally withdraw, and we go back to sort of the model of 1991 Gulf War with the Iraqi regime of Saddam Hussein. And then you impose no-fly zones, you impose more restrictions, blockades, and so on and so forth, and you just let it simmer. The Iranians, on the other hand, can't afford that. For them, as I said, it is existential.
All right. Let me ask you about markets. Oil peaked above $103 after the blockade announcement, then pulled back towards 99 when Trump made his Iran called a statement. The S&P 500 closed in the green. The IEA, World Bank, and IMF all warned today that even after reopening, prices stay elevated for a prolonged period. At what oil price, 110, 20, 30, does economic pain becomes politically unsustainable for President Trump domestically?
I think it's pretty, the pain is already increasing. There may be some room to maneuver, but I don't see that, the president can allow for prices to really jack up. I wouldn't even go into the 130 range. That's just too much. So yes, that is a constraint. But at the end of the day, I think that the Trump administration is trying to reach a settlement. This is why, if you look at what came out of the press conference in Islamabad, came out what the vice president said to Fox News. It does seem like the Americans are willing. There are certain red lines, and those are few. But the details, you can engineer the deal. And so that's why that flexibility is there, because the Americans know that the political and economic clock is ticking.
Right. Let's talk of France and Britain for a moment, as they are organizing a multinational Hormuz mission, which is distinct from the US blockade and from Iran. Is there a possibility of any of these parties responding to that?
Well, I mean, we have to look at capability. What are France and Britain capable of? I mean, if they were capable, then we would not be having the debate over NATO. We would not be having the debate over what will happen, in the future with Russia and Ukraine. So I think that the Brits and the Americans, the French and other European players, like the Spanish, obviously have to balance their domestic political compulsions with their foreign policy needs. And that's what they're trying to do. I just don't see them doing anything separately. I mean, they can do diplomacy. They can go talk to the Gulf states, which they're already doing. They can perhaps talk to the Iranians, which again they're already doing, and they're in conversation with the Americans. If they're going to do something, in a physical manner, in a logistical manner or kinetic manner, I think that'll have to be coordinated with the Americans on their own. I don't think they have the capability to do anything.
Yeah, Macron calls it strictly defensive and separate from the warring parties. But still, what could have triggered to come into play at this stage from the European side, I mean?
Because look, at the end of the day, everybody knows that the United States is rolling out a new geostrategy. The new geostrategy is based on the idea that there's going to be burden sharing and burden shifting by allies and partner nations around the world in different regions. And everybody knows that the United States wants to set up a new architecture based on this principle, and then it's going to retrench to the Western Hemisphere. So everybody's alarmed by that. I mean, they're not the only ones. The Europeans aren't the only ones. Look at the Japanese and then their posturing. They know that there's going to be some sort of an understanding between the United States, an accommodation between the United States and China, and they have to adjust to that new world. So the problem is that many people around the world are still sort of going by the old script of post-World War II, the so-called liberal rules-based international order.
True.
And when reality has moved on. And the United States is adjusting, and I think everybody else is adjusting as a result. And I think the European behavior has to be understood in that context.
Right. The last question. The stalemate scenario has a hard clock. The ceasefire expires on April 22nd, 8 days from now. When the ceasefire expires without a deal, what changes on the ground?
So there are a couple of ways this can go about. One is that during this time period, enough progress has been made that the United States agrees to an extension of the ceasefire, because this is something that the United States declared that, okay, we're gonna have a ceasefire and we're gonna halt operations for negotiations. So if there's progress, further progress than what happened in Islamabad, substantive, then we can see an extension if it's needed, because there could be things that are not, it's not possible to sort out physically in this 1 week. So that's one scenario. The other, and I think that that is, that could very likely be the case. Another scenario, which is more the best case, which is that everything wraps up. I find it a bit hard to believe that, given the gulf between the two sides, that everything will be wrapped up. And then there's the worst case scenario in which things collapse, and then we see another round of kinetic operations.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Kamran Bukhari, for your time. It was a pleasure having you on our show today. So 3 scenarios: a new wildcard in the form of Europe's alternative mission, and a ceasefire expiry date 8 days away. But there is still one layer we have not fully built: the parties not in the room who are shaping the outcome from outside. That is what we debate next. Stay tuned. Every major conflict has a cast of 2, the ones fighting and the ones who can end it from outside. After Islamabad, the outside players are no longer passive. They are making decisions. And in some cases, they are making the single move that tips one scenario into another. Let's discuss China first, the most consequential player which is not in the room yet calling the shots. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi called Pakistan's Ishaq Dar today. The message from Beijing, maintaining the ceasefire, is an immediate priority. Wang Yi referenced the Pak-China joint peace plan from last month, saying it still can serve as a direction. Beijing's foreign ministry spokesperson urged the US and Iran to remain calm and exercise restraint. China imports nearly a third of its oil through the Strait of Hormuz. Every day the strait stays closed or disrupted, China's economy takes a direct hit. Beijing needs this resolved. But American intelligence reports say China is also weighing the delivery of advanced air defense systems to Iran. Systems that would make Iranian territory significantly harder to strike from the air. Trump has already issued a direct warning. If China delivers those systems, even quietly, it transforms the stalemate into something structural and transforms the US-China relationship into something openly adversarial. That is the decision Beijing is sitting on right now. Let's talk about Europe, the ally that just broke ranks. France and Britain have not just declined to join the US blockade. They have announced a rival structure, a peaceful multinational mission, strictly defensive, separate from the warring parties. That is a significant act. US allies openly organizing an alternative to an American military operation is not normal diplomacy. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer told the BBC that British citizens are paying the price of this war in their energy bills, and it is not Britain's war to fight. Macron said this mission will be deployed as soon as the situation allows. Here is why this matters beyond the symbolism. If the France-UK conference produces a formal mandate and Iran signals openness to a European supervised passage agreement, it gives both the US and Iran an exit ramp that neither can directly offer the other. America can claim the blockade worked. Iran can claim it never negotiated under American coercion. It accepted a multilateral framework. That is the face-saving formula both sides need at the moment. Whether Europe can build it in 8 days is the question. Now let's come to Pakistan, the broker whose credibility is on the line. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif said today that the ceasefire is holding and that efforts are underway to restart the talks. He publicly thanked Japan's Prime Minister for supporting Islamabad process. China's Wang Yi called Ishaq Dar. Turkey's Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan, who is in close touch with Washington and Tehran and Islamabad, said the strait should be reopened through diplomacy, not force. Then there is the Israel and the Lebanon factor. Netanyahu supported the US blockade publicly today, denying reports of a rift between Washington, Israel, and Hezbollah continued to trade strikes on Monday. Lebanon is not in any of our three scenarios because Israel says it is not bound by any ceasefire that America and Iran have negotiated. Iran's position is explicit. It cannot negotiate peace for itself while Lebanon continues to burn under different rules. Every Israeli strike in Lebanon is a potential Iranian exit ramp from any negotiation table. This is not a peripheral issue. It was reportedly the issue that blocked the final inches in the Islamabad. And then comes the Gulf, the economic hostage with back channels. Abu Dhabi's national oil company CEO Sultan Al Jaber confirmed on April 9th that the strait is still not genuinely open. 230 loaded oil tankers are sitting trapped inside the Gulf. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, every Gulf state has one overriding interest: the strait reopen. Their revenue, their sovereign wealth, their funds, their development plans all depend on energy flows through a waterway that is currently contested. 5 actors, none of them at the table in Islamabad, all of them with the power to change which scenario wins. So the reality check is that the blockade is live. The ceasefire expires in 8 days. Iran says it called Washington. Trump says they want a deal. Britain and France are building a third path. China's Wang Yi is on the phone with Islamabad. 230 oil tankers sit trapped inside a Gulf that cannot function. Here is what tonight's Decode has built. 2 sides that cannot agree on who is winning, cannot agree on what a fair compromise looks like. Until that map is shared, deals collapse at the last inch, exactly as they did in Islamabad. The blockade is the most aggressive American attempt yet to force Iran to update its map of reality. Whether it works or whether something goes wrong before it works is the question the next 8 days will answer. Watch Pakistan's foreign minister. Watch China's logistic corridors to Iran. Watch the France-UK conference and whether Iran signals openness to a European off-ramp or not. Watch April 22nd, 8 days to a ceasefire expiry that changes everything. And watch for the first shot fired or not fired in a 34-kilometer strait that the whole world depends on. I am Zunaira Azhar. This was tonight's Decode. We will be watching every signal and we will decode it with every moment that moves it. Good night.